What happens when one of Hollywood's most respected actors sits down for what should be a routine interview and finds himself facing off against a host who seems determined to turn the conversation into a political battlefield? Well, buckle up, because what you're about to hear will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about live television etiquette. Before we dive into this incredible story, make sure to hit that subscribe button and let me know in the comments what you think about hosts who push their guests too far. The day started like any other morning at the View studio. Michael Caine, the legendary British actor known for his roles in the Dark Knight trilogy, Inception, and countless other classics, was scheduled to appear as a guest to promote his latest memoir. At 89 years old, Caine had seen it all in Hollywood, from the swinging 60s to the digital age, and his stories were always pure gold for talk show hosts. The producers were thrilled to have him, knowing his charm and wit would make for compelling television. Joy Behar, one of the show's co-hosts, had been with The View for years and was known for her sharp tongue and willingness to tackle controversial topics. She prided herself on asking the tough questions that other hosts might shy away from. However, on this particular morning, she seemed to have an agenda that went beyond the typical promotional interview. As Caine settled into his chair, adjusting his signature glasses and straightening his jacket, the other hosts, Whoopi Goldberg, Sarah Haynes, and Sunny Hostin, exchanged pleasantries with him. The atmosphere was warm and welcoming, exactly what you'd expect when hosting a beloved figure like Michael Caine. "It's such an honor to have you here, Michael," Whoopi began with genuine warmth. "Your new book has some incredible stories about your career spanning over 6 decades. Caine smiled, his distinctive voice immediately recognizable as he responded, "Thank you, Whoopi. It's lovely to be here. You know, at my age, I thought it was time to put some of these stories down on paper before I forget them all." The audience laughed appreciatively, clearly charmed by the veteran actor's self-deprecating humor. Sarah Haynes leaned forward, eager to hear more. "The book covers everything from your early days in London to working with Christopher Nolan. What's been the biggest change you've witnessed in the industry?" Sarah asked. "Well, the technology is extraordinary now," Caine replied thoughtfully. "When I started, we had to get everything right in one take because film was expensive. Now you can shoot for hours and fix anything in post-production. But the fundamentals haven't changed. You still need good stories and actors who can tell them convincingly." The conversation flowed naturally, with Caine sharing anecdotes about working with legendary directors and fellow actors. He spoke about his famous advice to aspiring actors, about the importance of not blinking on camera, and how that simple tip had helped countless performers over the years. "You've worked with so many incredible directors," Sunny noted. "Christopher Nolan, Woody Allen, John Huston. Do you have a favorite collaboration?" "They're all different," Caine explained. "Christopher is a master of complex narratives. Woody has this incredible ear for dialogue. And John, well, John taught me that the camera sees everything, even what you think you're hiding." Throughout these exchanges, Joy Behar remained unusually quiet, but those who knew her well could see she was waiting for her moment. She had that look in her eyes that regular viewers recognized, the one that appeared right before she dropped a conversational bomb. As the interview progressed, Caine discussed his working-class background in South London, how he'd worked various jobs before breaking into acting, and his philosophy about staying grounded despite Hollywood's success. "I've always believed that no matter how successful you become, you should never forget where you came from," he said. "My mother worked as a char lady, cleaning offices at night to support us. That's real work, and it kept me humble throughout my career." The other host nodded approvingly, clearly moved by his sincerity. But Joy had been waiting long enough. "Speaking of staying grounded, Michael," Joy interjected, her tone noticeably sharper than the conversation had been. "You've been quite vocal about certain political issues over the years. Some might say your views are a bit outdated for someone who claims to understand the working class." The temperature in the studio seemed to drop several degrees. Caine's expression remained polite, but there was a slight tightening around his eyes that suggested he sensed where this might be heading. "I'm not sure what you mean, Joy," he replied carefully. "I've always tried to stay focused on my work rather than politics." "Really?" Joy pressed, leaning forward with the aggressive posture she was known for. "Because I recall some comments you made about Brexit that seemed pretty definitive. And let's not forget your thoughts on certain social issues that frankly seem out of touch with modern values." The other hosts exchanged uncomfortable glances. This wasn't the direction any of them had expected the interview to take, and the audience could feel the tension building. Caine, however, maintained his composure with the skill of someone who had been handling difficult situations for decades. "Well, Joy, I believe everyone is entitled to their opinion," he said diplomatically. "I've lived through a lot of changes in the world, and I've formed my views based on my experiences. I don't expect everyone to agree with me, and I don't agree with everyone else." But Joy wasn't satisfied with this measured response. She had clearly come prepared for a confrontation, and she wasn't going to let Caine off the hook so easily. "That's a very diplomatic answer, Michael. But let's be honest here," Joy continued, her voice taking on an edge that made everyone in the studio uncomfortable. "When you have a platform like yours, don't you think you have a responsibility to use it more thoughtfully? Some of your comments have been frankly problematic." Caine's eyebrows raised slightly, and for the first time since sitting down, his famous calm demeanor showed the slightest crack. "Problematic? That's quite a strong word, Joy. Could you be more specific about what exactly you find problematic?" "Well, for starters," Joy said, clearly relishing the opportunity to press her attack, "your comments about young actors today, suggesting they lack the work ethic of your generation, don't you think that's a bit condescending? And then there's your stance on various social movements that frankly makes you sound like you're stuck in the past." Whoopi tried to intervene, sensing the interview spiraling out of control. "Joy, maybe we should get back to Michael's book and his incredible career achievements." But Joy held up her hand dismissively. "No, Whoopi, I think this is important. We have a responsibility to our viewers to address these things when we have influential people on our show." Caine's expression had shifted from polite confusion to something approaching annoyance. His voice remained steady, but there was a new steel in it that hadn't been there before. "Joy, I'm not quite sure what you're trying to accomplish here," he said, his British accent seeming to become more pronounced as his patience wore thin. "I came on your show to talk about my memoir, my career, and perhaps share some stories that might entertain your audience. I didn't come here to be lectured about my personal views by someone who seems to have already made up her mind about who I am." The audience was dead silent now, sensing they were witnessing something unprecedented. Sunny and Sarah looked mortified, while Whoopi kept trying to catch Joy's eye to signal her to back down. But Joy was just getting started. "Oh, so now I'm lecturing? I'm asking legitimate questions about statements you've made publicly. Isn't that what journalism is supposed to be?" "Journalism?" Caine repeated, and now there was definitely an edge to his voice. "Is that what you call this? Because it feels more like an ambush to me. You've invited me here under the pretense of discussing my work, and instead you're trying to turn this into some sort of political interrogation. I'm trying to have an honest conversation." Joy shot back, her voice rising, something that seems to be in short supply these days, especially from people in your generation who seem to think they can say whatever they want without consequences. That was the moment when Michael Caine's legendary politeness finally reached its breaking point. He sat up straighter in his chair, and when he spoke, his voice carried the authority of someone who had commanded respect for over 60 years in one of the world's toughest industries. "My generation?" he said, his tone now unmistakably cold. "Let me tell you something about my generation, Joy. We lived through world wars, economic hardships, and social changes that would probably terrify you. We learned the value of hard work, respect, and civil discourse. What I'm experiencing right now from you is none of those things." Joy's eyes flashed with anger. "Don't you dare talk down to me like that. I've been doing this job for years, and I've interviewed plenty of people from your generation who managed to evolve with the times instead of clinging to outdated ideas." "Outdated ideas?" Caine's voice was rising now, something that shocked everyone present because the man was famous for never losing his cool. "What exactly are these outdated ideas you keep referring to? The idea that people should be treated with basic courtesy? The idea that when you invite someone to your show, you should actually let them speak about what they came to discuss?" Whoopi made another attempt to intervene. "Okay, let's all take a breath here and maybe redirect this conversation." But Joy wasn't finished. "I'm sorry if you don't like my questions, Michael, but this is how real journalism works. We don't just give celebrities a platform to promote their books without addressing the problematic things they've said." "Problematic, problematic, problematic," Caine repeated, his frustration now clearly visible. "You keep using that word, but you still haven't told me specifically what I've said that's so offensive. Are you going to enlighten me, or are you just going to continue with these vague accusations?" "Fine," Joy said, leaning back in her chair with a satisfied smirk. "Your comments about how actors today don't understand real struggle, Your dismissive attitude towards social justice movements? Your general air of superiority when discussing anything that challenges your worldview? Should I continue? Caine was quiet for a moment, and those who knew him well would recognize this as a dangerous sign. When Michael Caine went quiet, it usually meant he was choosing his words very carefully. "You know what, Joy?" he finally said, his voice deceptively calm. "I've been in this business for over 60 years. I've been interviewed by some of the finest journalists in the world, people who knew how to ask tough questions while still maintaining professionalism and respect. What you're doing right now isn't journalism, it's grandstanding." The word hit Joy like a slap. Her face flushed red, and her voice became shrill. "Grandstanding? How dare you? I'm holding you accountable for your public statements, something more people should be doing." "No," Caine said firmly. "You're trying to create drama for your television show by misrepresenting my views and attacking me personally. There's a difference between accountability and ambush television, and you seem to have chosen the latter." Sarah finally found her voice. "Maybe we should move on to talking about some of the incredible scenes in Michael's book. There's a wonderful story about working with Sean Connery that I know our audience would love to hear." But Joy wasn't about to let anyone else take control of her interview. "We're not moving on until we address these issues properly." Caine turned to look directly at Joy, and his expression was unlike anything the veteran actor had ever shown on television before. "And what if I refuse to be part of your little performance any longer?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. Joy's eyes narrowed, clearly not expecting this level of pushback from someone she had assumed would be an easy target. "What do you mean, refuse?" she asked, her voice dripping with condescension. "You're here to answer questions. That's how this works." Caine's smile was cold now, completely devoid of the warmth that had characterized the beginning of the interview. "Actually, Joy, I'm here as a guest, not a defendant in your personal courtroom, and guests have the right to expect basic courtesy from their hosts." "Courtesy?" Joy laughed, but it was a harsh sound that made several audience members shift uncomfortably in their seats. "You want courtesy? How about showing some courtesy to the people you've offended with your backward statements over the years?" "There it is again," Caine said, his voice gaining strength. "These mysterious offensive statements that you keep alluding to but never actually quote. It's almost as if you're making them up as you go along." Joy's face turned an even deeper shade of red. "I am not making anything up. Everyone knows exactly what kind of person you are underneath that charming facade." "What kind of person am I, Joy?" Caine asked, his tone now dangerously quiet. "Please, enlighten me. Tell me exactly what kind of person I am." Whoopi was frantically trying to signal the producers to cut to commercial, but they were apparently as mesmerized by the train wreck as everyone else in the studio. "You're the kind of person who thinks his fame gives him the right to look down on everyone else," Joy continued, her voice getting shriller with each word. "You're out of touch, you're elitist, and you hide behind this gentleman act while spreading views that belong in the last century." The studio was so quiet you could hear a pin drop. Even the camera operators seemed to be holding their breath. Michael Caine sat perfectly still for what felt like an eternity, and when he finally spoke, his voice was like ice. "I see," he said slowly. "So you've invited me here today not to discuss my work, not to hear about my experiences, but to publicly humiliate me based on your own personal prejudices about who you think I am. I invited you here to have an honest conversation." Joy shot back, though her voice was starting to waver slightly. "No," Caine said, standing up from his chair with the dignity that had made him a star for 6 decades. "You invited me here to be your victim. You thought you could attack an old man on national television and make yourself look like some sort of crusader for justice." Joy also stood up, clearly not wanting to be physically diminished by having Caine tower over her. "Sit back down. We're not finished here." "Oh, but we are," Caine said, reaching for the microphone clipped to his jacket. "Because I refuse to participate in this charade any longer." "You can't just leave in the middle of an interview," Joy practically shouted. Caine paused in removing his microphone and looked at her with an expression of pure disdain. "Watch me." Sunny finally found her voice, though it was shaky. "Michael, please. Maybe we can start over and discuss your book properly." Caine turned to her with a much gentler expression. "Sunny, you seem like a lovely person, and I'm sorry you have to be associated with this embarrassment. But I won't be disrespected like this, not by anyone." Joy wasn't finished, though. "This is exactly what I'm talking about. You can't handle being challenged, so you're running away like a child." That stopped Caine dead in his tracks. He turned back to face Joy, and the look in his eyes was something none of them had ever seen before. "Running away?" he repeated, his voice barely above a whisper, but somehow carrying more menace than if he had shouted. "Lady, I faced down some of the toughest directors, producers, and critics in the world. I've worked through personal tragedies, professional setbacks, and industry changes that would have broken lesser men. I am not running away from you. I am choosing not to waste another second of my life on someone who clearly has no interest in conducting herself professionally." "Professional?" Joy laughed bitterly. "You want to talk about professional? A professional would answer the questions instead of throwing a tantrum." "A tantrum?" Caine's voice was incredulous now. "Joy, I've been nothing but polite to you despite your increasingly hostile behavior. I have answered your questions, even though they had nothing to do with why I agreed to come on this show. What you call a tantrum, I call maintaining my dignity in the face of someone who apparently has none." Sarah tried one more time to salvage the situation. "Michael, your fans would really love to hear about some of the behind-the-scenes stories from your most famous films." Caine softened again when addressing her. "Sarah, I appreciate that, I really do. But I'm afraid your colleague here has made it impossible for me to continue." Joy stepped closer to Caine, her finger pointed accusingly at him. "You think you can just walk out of here and make me look bad?" Caine looked down at her finger, then back up to her face, and his smile was absolutely arctic. "Joy, I don't need to make you look bad. You've done that quite thoroughly all by yourself." "How dare you!" Joy shrieked, completely losing any pretense of professionalism. "You arrogant, pompous has-been." The words echoed through the studio, and the collective gasp from the audience was audible. Even Joy seemed to realize she had gone too far, but it was too late to take it back. Caine's expression didn't change, but something in his posture shifted. He seemed to grow taller, more imposing, channeling every authoritative character he had ever played. "Has been?" he repeated, his voice deadly calm. "Joy, I've been working successfully in this industry since before you were born. I've won Academy Awards, been knighted by the Queen, and earned the respect of my peers through decades of professional behavior. What exactly have you accomplished besides making a fool of yourself on daytime television?" Joy's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water, clearly not having expected such a devastating response. Caine continued, his voice gaining power with each word. "You want to know what's really problematic? It's hosts who think they can ambush guests, twist their words, and create controversy for ratings. It's people who hide their own insecurities behind accusations of others being out of touch. It's someone who would rather destroy than create, tear down rather than build up." "Security!" Joy called out desperately, though everyone in the studio knew there was no security threat, just her own humiliation. "Don't bother," Caine said, dropping his microphone on the chair. "I'm leaving voluntarily. Unlike some people, I know when I'm not wanted." As he turned to go, Whoopi finally found her voice again. "Michael, on behalf of The View, I apologize for how this went." Caine paused and turned back to her. "Whoopi, you have nothing to apologize for. You're a class act, as are Sarah and Sunny. It's unfortunate that one bad apple can spoil the whole barrel." Joy was practically vibrating with rage now. "Don't you walk away from me. We're not done here." Caine stopped one final time and looked back at her with something approaching pity. "Joy, we were done the moment you decided to turn this into an attack instead of an interview. I've wasted enough time on you already." "You'll regret this," Joy called after him. "Nobody walks out on me." Caine's final words were delivered with the perfect timing and delivery that had made him famous. "On the contrary, Joy, the only thing I regret is not walking out sooner." And with that, the legendary Michael Caine strode off the set with his dignity intact, leaving behind a studio full of stunned faces and one very embarrassed host who had just learned the hard way that some people refuse to be bullied, regardless of the setting. The cameras kept rolling as Joy stood there, her face a mask of rage and humiliation, while the other hosts scrambled to figure out how to salvage what was left of the show. But the damage was done. In trying to make Michael Caine look bad, Joy Behar had only succeeded in exposing her own lack of professionalism and class. The audience sat in stunned silence, having witnessed something unprecedented in daytime television history. A guest had just walked out on The View, and it was entirely the fault of one host who had pushed too hard and revealed too much about her own character in the process. So there you have it, one of the most dramatic moments in talk show history, where a legendary actor showed exactly how a true professional handles an impossible situation. What do you think about hosts who cross the line from journalism into personal attacks? Let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more incredible stories from the world of entertainment.